Welcome to the Mastering the Game of Life podcast. In this podcast, there'll be insights around 3 key areas to mastering the game of life: purpose, prosperity, philanthropy. Your host, Paul Lowe, the third sector mentor, is the founder of Hearts Global CIC, which along with many other of his charitable commitments has been responsible for positively impacting thousands of people's lives, particularly young people from disadvantaged communities. Author of Mastering the Game of Life, From Pain to Purpose, and Speaking from Our Hearts books. Introducing your host, Paul Lowe.
A warm welcome, everyone, as ever, to this podcast. And those that have listened to previous podcasts will know that the theme so far has been around life's purpose. And what I intend to do with this one, I've got a very special guest, Mr. Bill Burridge, all the way from South Africa, would you believe? I was going to say sunny South Africa, but it's currently the winter there. And Bill is going to give us insights from a very high level about life's purpose. And when I say a high level, I mean from a training perspective, which is basically what Bill does with the New Insights program. So we'll come to, I'll formally introduce Bill in a moment, but what I want to do with this 10th episode, which I think that probably the most appropriate way to sum it up, is I have a purpose, but what next? And certainly as Bill and I converse over the next few minutes or hour or however that unfolds, the follow-on question will present itself, because, as I say, the first 9 episodes have been underpinned by purpose, and I think it's time to kind of move things on a little bit and answer that question, what next? So, without further ado, if I can introduce Bill. So Bill owns and runs New Insights, a life coach training organisation with companies and operations in both the UK and South Africa. He currently lives in Cape Town with his wife and daughter, whilst his son is working in London. So Bill, is there anything you want to elaborate on that by way of an introduction? Would you like to introduce yourself further to the audience?
Hi, Paul. No, thank you. That was a great introduction, I think, nice and short and sweet. I did want to say, though, I'm very pleased that you think I'm going to deliver something at a high level. I think I'm not quite so sure about that. I'm probably going to try and keep things simple. But anyway, there we go. I'm looking forward to talking with you and seeing how the discussion unfolds.
And that's an interesting point, Bill, is it not, that humility is a key part of what we do as life coaches? So that's that kind of response is what we come to expect as a generalisation, I believe, from people involved in this profession.
You know, Paul, it reminds me, just yesterday I was talking to my daughter. Now she's a teacher. And she happens to be doing extra lessons here in South Africa. The official language is English, but we have 11 official languages, actually. And the 2 probably most widely spoken are English and Afrikaans. And she goes to Afrikaans extra lessons because she was brought up in the UK and never really got educated in Afrikaans. So now, being a teacher, she has to teach in that language. So she's taking extra lessons. And she just happened to be sitting with the extra lesson teacher last night. And the teacher, without prompting or without asking what her parents did, said to Bianca, "Oh, I bumped into somebody who calls themselves a life coach today." She said, "Imagine being as arrogant as to think that you could coach somebody in life." My daughter fortunately kept her mouth shut, didn't say anything about what her parents do. But there we go. I thought that was quite funny.
Yeah, and that's an interesting insight, Bill, isn't it? To to new people that certainly when they first broach the subject, and all the misconceptions that, and I'm going to dramatically generalise it. Oh, you will fix my life for me, will you?
Exactly, and it's far from that, of course.
Yeah,
but I think isn't that just a symptom of the life we lead now? I think we jump to judgments about people, about careers, about situations without really being well informed. very often.
I agree with that, Bill. And I think from my own subjective, dare I say, perception of what's actually happening in today's society, I think a lot of the old values that we was brought up with kind of been lost, and it's more now around this kind of 100-mile-an-hour lifestyle, live now, pay later. And as I say, that traditional stuff's kind of gone by the wayside a little bit. And so people expect that instant gratification, that, that buy now, pay later mentality, even with emotions. It's a kind of become a throwaway society that we live in.
Yes, indeed. I couldn't agree with you more. I like to call it the 24-hour on cycle. There is no downtime anymore. This is a real problem. And there's huge competition for everything, or seemingly there's competition for everything. And people feel that they're in a rat race, in competition for resources, in competition for status, in competition for decent life, whatever it might be. Quite sad, really.
And I think, Bill, within that is we lose the one person, and I totally concur with what you've just said, by the way. Within that, we lose the one key person, ourselves.
Yes.
Because we do become embroiled in, I think the common term is the rat race. And as part of that, I think certainly what I've learned to do over the years is step back and say, no, I don't want to play that game, because my life is about me. And I often have this conversation, particularly when I'm talking to people in general and clients specifically, about being what the outside world might perceive as being selfish. And I use that, Bill, in the context to say my life's purpose is the number one reason I live. And that's above my kids, that's above my family. And the simple rationale for that is, without me being the very, very, very best I can be, I'm no good to you as a father, as a husband, as a brother, whatever the dynamic is. I need to invest in me first. My cup needs to be full before I can offer it for you to metaphorically drink out of. And I think that's certainly, from my own perspective, Bill, a very, very painful lesson I've had to learn over the years.
Yeah, Paul, exactly. I think that symptomatic of the world we live in is that people don't know what their purpose is. Now, I haven't been privy to the previous interviews that you've had, and I'm sure you covered the topic in some depth, but we are still on that tonight. So I guess we can continue with that discussion a little bit. I think that without an understanding of what your purpose is, you tend to be driven by your needs. Now, your needs in today's world relate to the pressures to perform that society places on you. And when you are at the behest of society or the external world, trying to keep up with expectations, what people expect of you, what employers expect of you, what spouses expect of you, what your kids expect of you, you do, as you say, lose complete track of what your inner voice is saying to you about what you want and where you want to go. So you become a bit of a puppet on a string, actually, dancing to the tune of the outside world rather than being driven by your own inner voice and ultimately your life purpose, as you so succinctly put it.
And on that note, Bill, I mean, it might be worth, you alluded to a couple of minutes ago about, previous episodes. So I interviewed a gentleman called Jim Britt on a previous episode, and Jim Britt was the amongst other things, the coach and the mentor to Tony Robbins for 5 years. He was Jim Rohn's business partner for 10 years. An absolute industry giant by any description. And I asked Jim the same question, because it's a question I get asked daily by people around this. Well, what is purpose? And, give me my purpose. Well, I can't give you your purpose. And even if I had a strong inclination what I thought I felt it might be, it's not my journey, it's not my life, it's yours. And that's for you to discover with a little help from your friends. So when I put this kind of situation to Jim, I've actually worked with Jim before as a mentee, and his answer I thought was brilliant in the extreme, and it was very simply this: your purpose is what you are doing now. That is it. So when we get embroiled upon these big visions, and there's nothing wrong with having a vision, because obviously it's a pathway to what might unfold in the future, and I stress the word might, but it's more about the here and now. And I think so many of us, Bill, and when I say so many of us, I use that term to describe the world in general. We get locked into this confusion, as you said, that external pressure and what I've got to do tomorrow, and all those mistakes I made in the past, and it's irrelevant. It's totally irrelevant. But this is the mind, isn't it, playing tricks and locking us into this ego-driven way of thinking. Yeah, but you've got to think about tomorrow, and you've got to do this, and you've got to do that. Well, what about me? Who's listening to me now in the here and now? What about and you used the right word for me, but what about my needs now? So I thought Jim's description of the here and now, because you've only got that moment, and another moment, and another moment, and another moment leads to life, to history. But I thought it was very good how he just kind of distilled it down to one almost crystallized view of, forget the other stuff, because that's all it is. It's just stuff. But we get locked into that and we get distracted. And I think the common cliche these days, Bill, is it not? Life gets in the way.
Exactly. It's rather ironic, isn't it? Because many of us think that is life. And well, to a great many of us, that really is life. And yet it's not fulfilling. It's frustrating. It's exhausting. And if we spend too many years doing it, we wake up one day and think, well, what was that all about? And that's sad, I think. And therefore, I think what you're doing, Paul, with your 3 pillars and with your podcasts and all the great people you've been interviewing is bringing this to the fore as a very important mission that we need to go on to bring people into connection with their life purpose. In fact, that there are many different ways in which you can talk about life coaching. I've spoken to a lot of people in life coaching who seem to view it as a way in which to resolve issues or move forward towards better things, and that's part of it, of course. But in my company, in New Insights, our life coach training, we put life purpose really at the center of everything. Now, we don't introduce life purpose at the beginning. We run what we call a transformational program of coaching over a period of 6 or 7 months. But ultimately, it leads up to find your life purpose, because that's what we believe is critical if you want to have a fulfilling, joyful life going forward. And of course, most people who come into life coaching for the first time really they're not ready for that. They're not ready to talk about a heady discussion about life purpose, probably don't really understand what it is, if truth be told. And it's not something they can relate to because of the external pressures that they face on a day-to-day basis. So we tend to start by setting goals and objectives and using that, if you like, as something of a surrogate for life purpose. And when people start becoming goal-focused and start working towards goals and objectives and taking the actions they need to achieve those, they start to develop in a way, they develop their self-awareness and they develop their inner power in a way that they start to question, is this what I really want? And what's happening is their inner beings or inner voices are leading them along a track to say, this is a good idea that you put forth this goal and that you're trying to achieve it, but is it really deep down what you want? And they start to introspect about what they want. And we get to a point in the program where we say, right, you're now ready to discover your life purpose if you don't already know what it is. And sometimes it can be quite emotional. You know, we've had people really break down in tears because they're so happy about finding their life purpose and ultimately what they want.
Yes. And go on, Bill. Sorry.
I had there's a wonderful quote that I came across that I thought I might just mention. It's by a gentleman called Amit Ray. And I didn't really know who Amit Ray was until I looked him up on Google. That's what we do nowadays, isn't it? He's an author and I think also a sort of a bit of a spiritual coach. He said the following: it doesn't matter how long you're spending on the earth, how much money you've gathered, or how much attention you have received. It's the amount of positive vibration you have radiated in life that really matters. I think that's wonderful. Ultimately, if you find your life purpose and you start doing what it is you're on this earth to do, you begin to radiate. You know, you radiate positivity, you radiate great vibes towards other people, and you start to contribute to the forward momentum, the growth and evolution of the earth and the planet and the universe. Getting a little philosophical right now, but ultimately that's what it's about, I believe.
And that getting philosophical, Bill, for me is an interesting point, because certainly when I reflect upon my own journey of coming from a, how can I put this, a very, very stark upbringing, and I'm being diplomatic and polite there, darkness, addiction, violence, very, very desperate days. Or should I say, very desperate decades. So people that have known me a long time, Bill, and I think this gives it some real context, and I certainly don't want this to be about me, but I use myself as an example. Oh, Paul, you've gone soft these days. Right, have I? Okay, why have I gone soft? Oh, you're not that rough, tough guy that you used to be. And my response, Bill, is very simple. Thank heavens. I am so grateful for that. Well, why? Because if I have a choice, and I did have a choice, it was around carrying on in those dark, desperate days, or actually, there's got to be something better. There's got to be another way. And that leverage, and I will call it inspiration, not motivation, of wanting to change, needing to change, was very, very powerful. So the philosophy, as you call it, Bill, I think is all important. And certainly one of the tricks, if you like, if that's the right word, when I'm coaching, depending, you know, where if somebody's really entrenched in that kind of rigid, real energy that, I think rigid is the right word, actually, defensive energy that I'm not going to... And I've got a simple trick. And as a generalization, females are not too bad with it, but guys can be quite challenging. And it's this. So it's based around self-love and more importantly, self-forgiveness in these early stages. So it's, okay, guys, and I will say, guys, just to give it some context, the next time you're looking in that mirror and having a shave, I want you to tell that person in the mirror how much you love that person, how much you forgive that person. And you know what else I'd like you to do? I'd like you to kiss that mirror and embrace that person.
That's lovely.
And I'll leave it to people's imagination around what kind of initial reactions I get on that. Just let's box it off by saying unfavourable.
Yeah.
But what's interesting, Bill, on that, and there's method in the madness, what's interesting in that is I'll say, okay, so when we touch base next week, I would like somebody close to you to be, certainly for the first couple of minutes, in on the session. And I want to talk to them. And well, why? It doesn't matter why. You know, are you going to commit to that or aren't you? And kind of reluctantly, yes, okay. So, and this has happened now a few times. So what happens is, you know, a week later or whenever we've rescheduled for, it's like, okay, Fred, Joe, Bill, whatever, how have your action points gone? And, you know, how's you know, the normal kind of ice-breaking stuff, good, bad, indifferent, whatever. Okay. So how did you go on with the exercise? And then there's usually a... Sorry, I can't hear you. How did you go on with the exercise? Yes, it was okay. I did it. Okay. And can you remember that I asked you to bring somebody close to you within your family, you know, a partner, whatever, in the room to be privy to this conversation? Silence. Silence. Hello, are you still there? Are you still there? Yeah, I'm here. Okay. So did you do that then? Did you do that? Yeah, I did that. Okay. So can I speak to, you know, who you're going to introduce me to then? You know, say it could be the wife, the girlfriend, the daughter, the mother, whatever, the sister, or you know, or whoever. And I'll talk and I'll say, okay, how's things been this week, and you know, various responses on that. So but that's not really why I'm doing it, Bill. The reason I'm doing it is, so I said, okay, can you put me back onto, let's say, Bill, can you put me back onto Bill, please? And okay, Bill, so how did you get on with that particular exercise of looking in the mirror? Yeah, I did, yeah. Sorry, I can't hear you. Bill, how did you get on with that exercise? Yeah, I did it. You did what, Bill? Bill, I can't... Can you explain to me what you did, please? Well, you know what I did. No. Let's be very, very clear. For the benefit of the witness, can you please clarify what happened? All right, then. I kissed the mirror. Are you happy now? The method in the madness on that, Bill, it is about that softening, that, you know, those defensive walls that we tend to put up because we are, I think, historically born survivors, and, you know, we're very frightened of what we don't know. Very frightened. So we stick with the tried and tested. And even if that's giving us pain, well, you know, better the devil you know, isn't it? Because, you know, I don't want no fuss. Stiff upper lip. Just get on with it. And, you know, there's certain things we don't talk about. And by the way, big boys don't cry. And they certainly don't kiss mirrors. Well, okay. Maybe if you could change things, and I want to come to change in a moment, Bill, if you could change things, probably the pain or the suffering that you've got in your life would also change, because if you keep doing the same thing, you're going to keep getting the same results. So something needs to be different. Something needs to intervene and break that pattern. And it's that creative thinking.
I think that coaching is an amazing intervention because it's exactly what it does. It creates an intervention which starts a process of change and can result in very powerful shifts and moves in people. As you've been describing now, Paul, you're quite a demanding coach, clearly, but that's what coaches are there for. I've experienced exactly what you've said in many respects. I think it's, if I'm to reflect on it, I think it's years of conditioning that we've experienced as people. You know, there's a sort of a mindset as to what the male persona should be like, what the female persona should be like. Mm. And we are taught to cloak ourselves with those personas, you know?
Yeah.
And it's very difficult, particularly, as you say, for men to do something that may be perceived as soft, as you put it. Now, here, I would like to refer back to my corporate life. I remember quite vividly. I've always, by the way, had it within me that I love to work with people, love to be involved in inspiring people. That ultimately is my purpose in life. But perhaps I didn't know it that clearly while I was in corporate life. I just knew that I loved working with teams of people, and ideally being in a leadership role where I could help to motivate and inspire other people. But, you know, I used to hear regularly from top leadership about how they felt about soft skills as opposed to hard skills. And it was, let me say, becoming a little bit more fashionable to talk about soft skills. But at the end of the day, it was the hard skills that really counted in business. And if you were somebody who is specifically interested in what they called soft skills, which is working with people, developing, inspiring, motivating people, that was a good thing, but not as good as if you were a damn good accountant or a damn good IT specialist or a damn good lawyer or a damn good powerful leader. And that's sad, I think, because ultimately it is the ability to relate to people, what corporates often call these soft skills, that is far more important than any of these hard skills. If you haven't got the soft skills right to begin with, you won't get the right hard skills in any case, or they'll be misdirected, or they won't be firing together properly, if you understand what I mean. So I think, yes, years of conditioning that have caused this problem. And it's a fascinating one. Let's leave it at that.
And I think just to, if I may, Bill, challenge you on your perception of me being a challenging coach. I mean, that's just one strategy, and you know this obviously very well, that as coaches we use different tools, and how we might use one strategy with one person. You know, I suppose what I'm trying to say, there's no one size fits all. So that particular strategy might be okay for Bill, for argument's sake, but would be inappropriate for somebody else. You know, the whole intonation, the body language, the non-verbal, all the stuff that that we're taught as trainees and as coaches. It all comes into play, doesn't it?
Yeah, indeed. I mean, I think challenging is a critical skill that coaches need to have. But I think that the point you're alluding to is that there are different ways to challenge.
Yes,
and it depends very much on the identity of and nature of the person that you're working with.
Yes, absolutely. I think when I look back at my time in football, that was very much, to use the dressing room analogy, Bill. Some players will respond to an arm round the shoulders, sensitive, touchy-feely. Others need a right rocket up the proverbial backside, and an effective communicator will have that in their locker to be able to slide up and down that scale. But it's all about knowing the people, because ultimately, and I've said this many, many times before, you can have the best business in the world, but ultimately it's down to a simple thing called relationships and how you treat people and how you communicate. And that starts from within, doesn't it? You know, and for me, that is part of, in my case, my life's purpose. So
I totally agree with your reflection there. And I would say that one of the key skills that we try to build or promote in life coaches is flexibility, the ability to treat people for their uniquenesses and to try to get in their shoes and walk in their shoes, as it were. So yes, you know, a one size certainly doesn't fit all approach when it comes to coaching. You have to really be very flexible depending on who you're dealing with.
Yes. I think at this point, Bill, I'd kind of like to, and I know that Nancy Sims has been quoted. I mean, I follow quite a lot of Nancy's work. I think she's an amazing poet. I love her stuff. And I think at this stage, I'd just like to kind of put the trust in your purpose element into perspective, which is one of Nancy's poems. And it kind of encapsulates what we've been speaking about before we actually move on to from purpose to the change process, Bill. So if you can just give me a moment, and I will quote Nancy's Trust in Your Purpose poem, because as I say, I think it gives it some real context.
Right.
Everything belongs somewhere. The stars belong to the sky, the waves to the ocean, the rain to the clouds, the wind to the trees, the mountains to the valleys. Everything has meaning and purpose. Some need to fill, something to accomplish on earth. So do you. You have meaning and purpose. You have a need to fill. You have something important to accomplish. Trust in your purpose. Although it may not be clear at times, trust that you have one. Your heart knows what it is. Listen to your heart. Listen to your God-given talent. Don't doubt it. Don't ignore it. Don't fight it. Don't dismiss it. Trust in your purpose, and you won't go wrong in your life's work. It will feel right. It will make you happy. You will feel at home. You will feel at peace. You will feel complete fulfillment. You will be a success doing what you were born to do. Trust in your purpose. It will bless you and others in so many, many, many ways. Does that not sum up purpose, Bill, for each and every one of us, whether we know what it is or not?
That's very inspirational. I listened to that and felt the hair on the back of my neck going up. I love it. I thought, Paul, I know we're moving on in a little bit, but I just wondered whether it was worth me just adding a little bit to that. I don't know to what extent you've gone into this, but we, as I said to you, the central part of the New Insights Life Coach Training Program is ultimately to help the client find their purpose. And we had a technique that we used to use to do that at the right point. And my wife worked with this. As you know, Jenny, my wife, is a coach too, and she worked with this for a long time and eventually did her own research and came up with her own process, which we've now adopted because it works so well. As Jenny will say, when you ask somebody what their purpose is, normally you'll get a bit of a blank stare at first, and it takes quite a lot of effort to get there. However, a shortcut is to ask somebody, what is your gift?
Yeah.
And very often people can relate to that quite easily. I have a bit of a gift for, writing or speaking or knitting, or I'm very good at this, or I'm very good at that, or I have a bit of a talent in working with kids or something like that. So people can recognize quite easily and simply what their gift or unique talent is. And very often that can uncover their purpose through finding out how do you apply, when is it that you really love life when you are applying your gift. And somebody might say, well, my gift is working with kids and I just absolutely love it when I'm teaching, helping kids to understand something a bit better perhaps. And that's their passion. And then you would go on to say, well, what is the power behind your passion? In other words, what sort of attributes do you bring to the fore when you are teaching kids? And a person might say, well, I've got a great deal of restraint, or I've got a great deal of patience, or I have a great deal of knowledge that I like to convey. And these are all part of the power that underpins that passion. And this is a very helpful process to go through, this, as I called it, this gift, passion, power process that leads you into discovering exactly what your purpose is. I thought I'd throw that in. I don't know whether you've covered that before, but we find that an extremely helpful process to go through if you're wanting to get to grips with your purpose.
Yeah, and I think the use of that word gift, Bill, it certainly opens up a whole new portal, doesn't it? Rather than what may be perceived initially as this, well, I don't know what my purpose is. I think it's very easy as coaches that obviously do a lot of work around, continuous professional development and are constantly digging down and asking those big why questions and questioning and challenging self and others and that peer support. So I think relatively it becomes quite, I don't know if easy is the right word, but certainly easier than somebody that's just in pain and suffering and they know there's got to be something better, but they just haven't got a clue where to start. And, in that desperate phase, and I use the metaphor of being stuck at the bottom of a hole, shouting up and help me, help me, help me, but don't really know how to get out. And even when somebody comes along with a metaphoric rope and throws that down, come on, you can get out there. And it's like, do I really want to get out? Because, as we've alluded to earlier on.
Yes, indeed.
This certainty, we bring in one of the human needs then of certainty. We're driven by pain or pleasure. And, there's all these decisions going off about, well, actually, thinking about this, do I really want to change? Because I don't know what I'm letting myself in for. At least I know I can handle this pain because I'm used to it. It gives me certainty. We're going off at a tangent here, but there's all the six. Well, most of the six human needs could be met by that. The significance, the connection, the variety, the certainty, the connect. It kind of ticks a lot of boxes there, Bill, doesn't it? So, the whole thing is it can be a minefield, and this is why I find that as coaches, this heartfelt or heart-centered approach is absolutely vital. And that's not to say that tough love can't come into play. Of course it can. But I think there's, in today's society, particularly when we look and when we hear people and, we listen to their challenges along their journey, I think, we're kind of going back to the top of the conversation around the way society, it's so fast and furious, and we just get on with it. And I think it is time to take a metaphoric breather now, collectively within the world, and say, is this what I really, really want? Because, to quote your good lady, life is a gift, and we've got a relatively small window of opportunity on this, in this physical form to live out that particular scene.
Well, coming back to your little analogy at the beginning, where you said somebody down the bottom of a deep, dark hole gets thrown a rope to help them out, and then starts to wonder whether they really do want to get out. I found that fascinating because this is an issue we confront a lot in coaching, isn't it, Paul?
Yes.
We find that people are desperate to change, but when confronted with what is needed to make that change, they will very often retreat back into their shell, the comfort of their shell. It's what they know rather than what they don't know. And I would say this is primarily because people do not have purpose. They haven't yet got to the point where they've understood what their purpose is, and therefore any change to the status quo is actually threatening. Because instead of thinking, well, if I get out of this dark hole, I can follow my life purpose, what they're thinking is, if I get out of this dark hole, there may be something even worse out there. And therefore, let me stay where at least the devil I know is better than the one I don't. It's a real challenge in coaching, and I think it's something that we all come to terms with, trying to move people past what I call a worst fears mentality. And all change starts with a confrontation of what would this mean? How bad could it be? And it takes quite a mind shift to move people into what I call the opportunity mode, which is where people stop worrying about how bad things could be and what could happen or go wrong if they make this change, into, well, what's the opportunity here? What could go right if I make this change? It's a big mind shift and difficult for a lot of people to make. Yeah,
and just on that note, Bill, of climate, of being down that hole, I show a bit of vulnerability here, and I share an experience here, in as much that certainly within the early days of my coaching practice, I actually was the one that was regularly jumping down that hole. Let me take your pain. Let me, rather than standing at the top of that hole with a strong rope and loads of encouragement, a small step, come on, just another inch, just another inch, and reward yourself because you're getting closer to the top. What I've done, Bill, over the years, not now, but certainly in the past, was I've said, okay, I can see you're in so much pain. Let me jump down that hole. Let me throw this rope away. Let me get down this hole and comfort you with a metaphoric arm round the shoulder. Now, that doesn't take a lot of working out to see how counterproductive that is, because you've now got two people stuck down a hole.
Exactly.
So I mentioned that, Bill, in the context of maybe new trainee coaches coming on board. I'm certainly not unique in making that. I won't call it a mistake, because it's not a mistake, but taking those early steps of learning. And when I was so idealistic, I actually thought I would change the world single-handedly. So I'm a bit wiser now.
Yeah.
So the change process then, Bill, let's dig down a bit on that. So I'm going to play a little bit of devil's advocate here, Bill, if I may. one of the comments that also comes back to me at least semi-regularly is, oh, it's okay for you. You've got it sorted now. You don't really understand. How can you understand what I'm going through? You've got all these fancy words and fancy this and fancy that, but you don't understand what's going off in my world. What's your take upon that, Bill? I mean, okay, let me take a backward step. Have you ever had that said to you?
Oh yes. It's a common thing that one hears, I think. And look, to some extent, it is true. It's very true because we're all unique. We all have unique experiences. We all have unique backgrounds. We all have unique educations. We have different parents. We go to different schools. We experience different experiences. Not one of us is the same. Some of us cruise through life having a great time. Others have real trauma and heartbreak. It's very different for every one of us. So it is true to an extent when somebody says it's okay for you, you don't understand how I feel. But there is also an element of taking responsibility here, I think, Paul.
Yeah.
On the part of the individual who is experiencing pain or experiencing discomfort through their circumstances or whatever. The only way to move on ultimately is to accept responsibility for the situation you find yourself in. If you are trying to play the blame game or to justify your situation by saying, well, it's okay for you, you don't understand, you can't help me because you're not in my situation, all you're really doing is moving your power to somebody else, giving it to somebody else and saying, well, I need help, you help me out. Whereas the only person who can really help you is you. Now, the coach's job is not to help so much as to empower, which is a bit different. Helping implies giving support, giving advice, throwing a lifeline to someone. Empowering is very different because it's about helping that person to help themselves, to realize their own inner power and to realize their own unique talents and gifts and abilities. So it's very, very different. So I think it is something that we hear commonly. And it is something that has to be dealt with, and sometimes it requires what you just called a little bit of tough love, is one way of calling it. But it is a matter of reflecting back to the individual the importance of taking responsibility for all you do.
Totally agree with that, Bill, totally agree with that, because when Robbins talks about the two inherent fears we have as human beings, bar none, whether we're aware of it or not, and there is scientific data to back this up, the two biggest fears we have as to varying degrees are, one, I will never be loved, and two, I will never be good enough. And to varying degrees, we've all got that in us. And I think what we learn to do as we advance and as we transform, we learn that these, I think it's a question of awareness. So long as we're aware of a potential scenario, we can handle it better. But I mean, if that's used right, that can actually be a very powerful lever. But also for me, Bill, it's around embracing yourself and accepting yourself that actually, as a human being, you are vulnerable and you are not perfect. And beware of that pursuit of perfection, by the way, because it's a misnomer. It doesn't exist. And it's like chasing a rainbow. You're never going to catch it. So don't, life is very short. Enjoy it. Embrace yourself in it and surround yourself with people that actually really do care. Because I think from my own experience, Bill, and based on a lot of self-sabotaging over the years, deservedness issues, limiting beliefs and all that, there was an army of people that showed me love, but I wasn't worthy of it. Why? Because I thought I'd never be good enough, because that's what was drilled into me, as a young kid. So that detracted me, I think, from fulfilling from an early age my purpose. I knew what my purpose was from a very, very early age. I just went about it completely wrong. But Some would say, well, you was actually fortunate though, Paul, that you discovered your purpose. Well, yes, okay. And I embrace that because, as you know, to go back to what Jim Britt says, we are where we are. There was only what there was in that moment, and it was perfect there and then. Might not have felt like it from a human perspective, Bill, but it's all part of the, the bigger picture that unfolds as time goes by.
Well, I love that comment. We are where we are. We often contrast counseling and coaching. And of course, counseling is about very often going back to helping people go back into the past to deal with their past traumas and issues that have really stopped them from progressing and obstructing them from moving forward. In coaching, we tend to take the approach that says, well, we are where we are. Your history does not have to define your future. So no matter how bad you think your history is or how good you might think it is, it doesn't necessarily define what your future is going to be. You are where you are right now, and we can help you work towards building a great future, no matter who you are or what your background is, where you come from. And I think that goes back to that whole issue of responsibility. You made the comment that Tony Robbins said the two big fears are that we will never be loved or never be good enough. Once again, that I think is a reflection of the way in which we exist relative to the society that we're in. We look outside for validation.
Yes.
We look externally to determine the level to which we are successful as people. And going back to your comments right at the beginning of this talk, Paul, that's the big mistake we make. We don't go within, we go without. If we can learn to harness our individual powers, learn to relate to our inner voices and inner beings, rather than to relate to what other people are telling us, we will derive the power that we need to survive and thrive, I think, in life. Particularly if we find our life purpose in the process. And the issue of whether other people love us or think we're good enough becomes irrelevant. It's whether we think we're good enough and whether we love ourselves that's important. Because frankly, is it important that my wife loves me, or is it more important that I love her? Well, I can't control whether she loves me or not. I can only control whether I love her. So let me do what I can to the best of my ability, and the likelihood is that it will reflect back on me, either through her feelings or through the way I feel about myself. There's a lot of personal responsibility that comes in here.
Yes, I totally. I mean, that was summed up brilliantly. So just kind of moving things on then, Bill, around the stepping stones, say from session one, around, as you say, goal setting, to the penultimate one, number 12, around life's purpose. Just give us a little taster, Bill, on if I was going to come to you as a trainee, Bill, can you help me move, give my life some definition, some focus, help, I've got so much in me, but I just don't know. What kind of stepping stones, Bill, would be involved in that program?
Oh, right. Well, you were referring here to the New Insights coaching program.
Yes.
Oh, okay, great. Well, Paul, what I've done relatively recently, we're about to come up with a new version of the training program. And you're probably aware that coaches talk a lot about coaching models. And it used to get my goat a little bit. I went to meetings with other coach training institutions, and they all be going off about models. What model do you use? And I used to say, well, we don't have a model. We have a process that we take people through. And they turn their noses up and say, well, you have to coach according to a model. And I'd say, why? What's wrong with the process? Anyway, this got to me a little bit, so I decided I'd go ahead and create a model. So I came up with Model Insights, INSIGHTS, which talks a little bit to the process that we take people through in New Insights life coaching. The I starts for intention, and as you've just said, that's the goal setting part of it. We start by getting the client to set goals. setting their intention. What is it they're trying to achieve? And very often, as I said earlier, what happens further down the track in the coaching program is they find that the goal that they've set in the beginning isn't really what they want to achieve at all. But that's fine. We know that it's going to evolve and change. It's just a means to an end in the beginning. So I for intention, and then we get to N, which stands for needs and balance. And this is where we take the client through the issue of the 6 human needs that you were talking about, and how to create a life of balance. Most people are trying to balance their basic needs. You know, they're out of whack, and they're constantly chasing one way or another in order to try and get their needs balanced. So we talk about the importance of that, getting those basic life needs balanced so that you can move on to the more important needs of growth and contribution, which define us once we have purpose and once we have direction. So that's the N. The S, I, and G really refer to development of self-awareness. That's the S. Development of understanding of one's inner power. That's the I. And then G stands for growth. So the sessions we take the client through in the middle part of the program play to the SIG, and really all the work is all about looking at beliefs, looking at values, and looking at the rules we have for the values that we feel, and getting the client to understand how their beliefs developed, how they can actually change their beliefs. They're not held hostage to any of their beliefs, and the same with their values as well. And then we get into a section on taking responsibility and on the importance of communication, understanding how you communicate with others and how others communicate with you and how you can improve that. So that all plays into that SIG acronym. And then, of course, we get to the H, and the H stands for higher purpose, or life purpose, as we more commonly call it. And that's where we get into the exercise on uncovering, as I call it, your life purpose. I think all of us innately know our life purpose, but consciously we're not aware of it. So that's why I talk about uncovering or excavating it. And then from life purpose, we get into the H. Where was I? H. We get into the T, which is taking stock. Once you have uncovered your life purpose, life changes, of course, quite drastically as you get excited about going forward in a purpose-driven fashion. So it requires a period of taking stock, and then the S finally stands for setting a new path, which is setting out on your new exciting life driven by life purpose and values. So that's a little bit of a snapshot of the process that we would take people through in our transformation life coaching.
Okay, Bill, well, thank you for that share. I mean, what's interesting there is your reference to models. I mean, I've certainly, along my journey, developed a lot of models from the 3 L's, which is around learning, around loving, and around legacy. And on a different level, I wouldn't say a high level, but on a different level, the 3 P's, which is around purpose, which is around prosperity, which is around philanthropy, but they're all much of a muchness. But what I've found, the further and further I'm getting into my journey, is it's a distillation that actually people just need to know that they're valued, that somebody cares for them. And, you know, when you strip everything right back, ultimately that's what I'm finding more and more and more. That as human beings, you know, we might be multimillionaires on the outside, but what's really going off on the inside? And I think in today, you know, we keep referring to today's pressured society. There is so much external pressure, but, you know, and I'm going to repeat this, as I say, what I made at the top of this conversation, that we forget the one person that truly, truly matters, because we're too busy chasing external goals. And that one person is obviously ourselves. So I think it is time, to quote John Major, to go back to basics and have a look at, how we can start to actually enjoy life and be happy. For many years, Bill, I had a bit of a problem with that word happy. I felt it was over cliched. You've got to be happy in life. You've got to be happy in life. Well, what's happiness? But the reality is, I think as life goes forward and you get more and more complex understandings, the paradox is actually life is a very, 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 very simple game. And I think it's our duty, if duty is the right word, as coaches and as mentors, to help people along, to say, listen, simple law of nature, it might be dark tonight, but tomorrow morning, there will be light. And maybe around midday, there may be some sunshine as well.
Well, this issue of happiness, here's what I think, for what it's worth. I think that we're here to contribute to this is a collective purpose, not an individual purpose, but we all have individual purposes that feed into this. But the collective purpose of humanity is really to help the planet, the universe, evolve and expand. And each of us has a little role to play in that. And I believe that if you find your purpose and you can carry out that purpose, the reward that you get from that is a happy life. It's just as simple as that.
Yeah. And I suppose in many respects, Bill, that's why in Robbins's model of the 6 human needs, contribution is the highest, because it is around that. We can be the best we can be by meeting our own 4 core needs, and then the 2 higher spiritual needs of growth and then contribution is what it's all about. We leave, to quote Stephen Covey's 9th habit, we leave the world a better place. And through my personal and sort of many diverse life experiences, I've yet to come up with a better reason for living. It's so ingrained with me now, Bill, that, going back to when someone, you've gone soft, Paul. Well, thank heavens I've gone soft. I really appreciate that.
Exactly. I mean, a powerful American president, Robert F. Kennedy, once said, the purpose of life is to contribute in some way to making things better. And that for me sums it up as very simple and very powerful, and just plays on what you've just said.
Absolutely. Okay, Bill. Well, hopefully our conversations provoke 1 or 2 thoughts and, provided some value and some insights to the listeners. And all that remains for me now, Bill, is to thank you for your time. Thank you for your input and your insights and for sharing with us. Before we go, Bill, is there anything that you'd like to do or say by way of signing off?
Well, I'd just like to thank you, Paul. I think it was a fascinating discussion. I love talking with you. I think you've got some great stuff to share, and I hope that the rest of your sessions go really well. It sounds like you've got some great people lined up, and I'm very privileged that you asked me to be part of it. So thank you very much for that. If anyone, having listened to what we've said, if anyone resonates with some of the stuff that I talked about around coaching, you might want to look at the New Insights website. It's a little bit of a long URL, unfortunately. It's www.life-coach-training, and then either -UK or -SA.com, depending on whether you're in South Africa or the UK. We sell home study programs throughout the world, actually, but we have distributors in the UK and South Africa. And we specialize in home study training because most people who get into life coaching do so after some years of experience, and they're pretty busy at the time. They're either in employment or they're stay-at-home parents, or they've got some already got some self-employment going or whatever. So attending workshops and seminars, that type of thing, is not always that easy. That's why we designed it the way we did. But anyway, I once again, thanks very much for making me part of this, Paul.
My pleasure, Bill, my pleasure. So all that remains now is for me to say, more importantly, thank you very much to you, the listeners. Repeat that I hope you've got some value, some useful insights, some useful tips. And until the next time, take care and enjoy life.
Bye, everyone.
Thanks for listening to the Mastering the Game of Life podcast. Drop a line to paul@paullowehearts.com with any thoughts or questions you may have, and he'll be more than happy to respond. Alternatively, check out Paul's website at paullowehearts.com or any of his social media feeds under the same name. Remember, mastering life starts by embracing our hearts.